What's up, guys? Welcome to Knockers on the Bottom. I'm your host, Jay Mill. Jay Miller, if you like. Let's get into it. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Once we get to 100, we'll give something away. But let's get into it. Today, with the preseason finally completely done and over with, we're going to take a look at, what I project to be the Cowboys' 53-man roster. Now, I will say that going into this, I thought it would be a little more difficult, but I feel like it's pretty straightforward. And I actually ended up with a couple of extra spots that I gave to some of the guys that I thought were standouts in camp. So we're going to see. You guys can comment after the video, see if you agree with me. But any suggestion that you have, hey, cut this guy, add this guy, I'll be really open to. So make sure you share any of that feedback. So first with quarterback, I went with two. I went with Joe Melton and Dak Prescott. The reason that I went with two and those two specifically is because I feel like the Cowboys, if they want to get some other people on the roster that, might be deserving of a spot, and the first 24 hours is super important, right? Because there's some guys you got to keep on your roster if you're going to revert those guys to injured reserve to return. There's some other guys that you're going to kind of want to put on pup. There's some guys that you're going to want to sneak on IR and just kind of keep them there all year and, hope, give them like the, hey, I'll see you next year. So there's going to be some tweaking here. And so there might be a few positions where I'm wrong just because the Cowboys want to do some things like designated guy, injured reserve to return. When you do stuff like that, you have to have a person on your roster for one day, and then after that, you can put them on IR, designated to return, and then they can stay there until they're ready and needed to go. So that might affect someone like Robert Jones. That might affect someone like Jonathan Mango. Might affect someone like Kalen Carson. But we'll get there. Anyway, starting the two, Joe Melton, Dak Prescott. I don't think Will Greer is in danger of getting claimed on waivers, which is why I have the Cowboys cutting him. I actually think the Cowboys will end up signing him back to the practice squad, and most weeks he'll just end up being the third, emergency quarterback on game day. But the Cowboys will carry three for most of the season. I just have them doing some number gymnastics to make sure that they have enough other spots to keep some of the guys that they don't want to expose to waivers. So now we get to the running backs, right? So I have Javonte Williams, Jaden Blue, Miles Sanders, and Phil Maffa. So I have the Cowboys keeping four running backs, pretty much all four of the guys that they have right now. Deuce Vaughn's on the outside looking in. Maybe he ends up being a practice squad guy. Malik Davis is on the outside looking in. Again, maybe a practice squad guy. I do think Malik Davis will get a job on a practice squad with another team, even if he doesn't get a job in the practice squad with the Cowboys, just simply for the fact that he came in, pretty much no training camp, no reps, and he had a really good game in the second game of the preseason. So a team is going to see value in that, even if the Cowboys don't. Now, the Cowboys do have Deuce Vaughn's dad as one of the scouts in the scouting department. So if you ask me who of the two was probably going to be back on the practice squad, I would say the Cowboys are probably going to release Deuce. And if nobody claims him, they're going to sign him back to the practice squad. And Deuce is going to be that guy that's kind of sitting there, and going into a stereo with the Cowboys. At fullback, I have one. That's Hunter Lipke. He's the only fullback I have, and I think that's pretty much self-explanatory. Hunter Lipke does a lot of different things. Versatility, fullback. He can play some tailback for you. He can play some tight end for you. So he's going to be one of those guys. He does something on the roster that nobody else does. This is why I think he'll be there. So that's your first seven guys. Now, as far as wide receivers, I have CeeDee Lamb. I have George Pickens. I have Cavante Turpin. I have Jalen Tolbert. And I have Ryan Flournoy. So those are my five. I chose Ryan Flournoy over Jalen Brooks. I believe Flournoy has had the better camp. Flournoy is a beast size-wise. Flournoy can block well. And he's also only going into his second year. He plays special teams. The reason I don't have Jonathan Mingo there is because of his current injury, and from what I'm hearing, it's a 4 to 6 week injury. So I have Jonathan Mingo hitting the pup list. So I think he's designated to be out at least for the first 4 games, and then you activate his practice window, which gives them, I think it's 3 weeks after that to practice before they have to make a decision on, okay, you're active now, or you revert to IR, not designated to return, and your season is over. So I think they're going to play that way with Jonathan Mingo, and that's going to open up a roster spot for them. So I don't have Jonathan Mingo off the team. I just have him on the physically unable to perform list. And then, well, once we go through to the tight ends, I have Jake Ferguson, I have Luke Schoonmaker, and I have Brevin Spann-Ford. I think that's pretty much going to be that spot sewn up. There's not really much room for gray area there. I thought about Fairweather, but I don't think he's done enough to make it over one of these 3 guys. I did think of John Stevens, and I did have a couple of open spots later on. So I'll tell you once we get to the end of this what couple of spots I had open and who I put there, and you can tell me, hey, I would rather put this guy or that guy in that place. I'd rather Trayshawn Holden be there, or I'd rather Fairweather be there, or Stevenson be there, and we can, make that adjustment as we go. But that's who I got. So then to round out offense, we have the offensive lineman here. So that is Tyler Smith, of course, Tyler Guyton, Cooper Beebe, Tyler Booker, Terrence Steele, Nate Thomas, Brock Hoffman, TJ Bass, Sadiq Charles, and Hakeem Adeniji, and with Robert Jones being on IR. Now, one of the things that could happen is Robert Jones could take the place of one of these other guys. Let's say the Cowboys cut Ryan Flournoy, and Robert Jones could be placed in an IR for 24 hours so that he can be reverted to the IR designated to return, and then you could sign back Ryan Flournoy to your active roster after you make that decision. But that's some gymnastics there. You could also put Robert Jones on a PUP list and guarantee that he'll miss the first 4 weeks of the season, leave the IR out of it completely. But the Cowboys have a couple of roster mechanisms that they can use. But for the most part, I think that's what we got as our offensive linemen. So that's our entire offense there. Now we're going to switch over to the defensive side. So for corner or for defensive back, I kept quite a few. I've got Trayvon Diggs, Kyer Elam, Malik Hooker, Donovan Wilson, Deron Bland, Siobhan Ravel, Wanye Thomas, Marquise Bell, Israel Mukuamu, and Keemon Hall. So it looks like I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I got 10 corners, or 10 secondary, I guess. With you got basically 4 in the safety department and then 6 in the corner department, with Izzy Mukuamu kind of being that floater, right? Because he plays some safety sometimes and he plays some corner sometimes. But basically 10, yes, I did not keep the special teams ace there. That's been with us for a few years. But I think at this point we need those spots for people who can actually play offense and defense. And every single one of these guys, on top of giving you special team snaps, can also give you offensive and defensive snaps. So I'm sorry, CJ Goodwin. I love you. You've been awesome for all these years, but I need that roster spot for somebody who can actually help me on game day in more than one position. We can't just keep that spot for one position. So unfortunately, CJ Goodwin, bye. See you later. And some team will probably scoop him up and he'll probably do great things for them. But I think the Cowboys need to sever those ties there. So then we go to linebacker. Linebacker, I've got Maris Leofau, Jack Sanborn, Kenneth Murray, Damone Clark, and Shamar James. Now, I do have DeMarvion Overshone sitting on the PUP list. Oh, and also to back up a little bit, in case you're wondering, when it comes to the defensive backs, I have Kalen Carson as a candidate for either the PUP or the IR. I think Kalen Carson could definitely be one of those people that the Cowboys put on injured reserve and he's just out for the season. And they're just like, hey, young man, see you next year. Work on your strength, work on your technique, work on your confidence, get your body 100% right, get paid, but we'll see you next year. So I think he's definitely a candidate for that, or at least the PUP list where he missed the first 4 weeks of the season. And again, activate that practice window. You got 3 weeks to practice. That's also where I have DeMarvion Overshown for now. Now the Cowboys could choose to put DeMarvion Overshown on the active roster and then have him be there for one day and then do the injured reserve designated to return. So that does add a little bit of gray area there. So those are 2 roster spots that could not necessarily be available that I have available, because I would manipulate it as in put you on the PUP list, because the PUP list basically takes DeMarvion Overshown all the way to, the first week of October. And then you activate his practice window. And now you have another 3 to 4 weeks to have him practice before you have to necessarily put him on the game day roster. So you could manipulate the PUP to where DeMarvion Overshown doesn't have to appear in a game for the first 8 to 9 weeks of the season, and that could give you a lot of time, to figure out what's happening with the rest of your roster. So I would do PUP for him, Mingo, and Carson. And I would do Robert Jones, maybe IR for good, or do the one day on the roster and then IR designated to return. In that case, I would do something crazy like the Cowboys normally do, which is like cut your long snapper and, put Robert Jones on a roster, and then the next day do that and then sign Trent Sieg back. You can do something like that. They've been known to do those types of things. But that was just the backup with Kalen Carson. So the linebackers, you see who I have. I think that's pretty straightforward. I think Shamar James has showed enough to earn his spot. I think Damone Clark has showed enough to at least begin the season on the roster, and then we see what happens. If he, happens to fall off and play, then we can make those adjustments accordingly. So now we'll get to edge. I've got the Cowboys having, or actually, let's just go defensive line in general. So the Cowboys have Micah Parsons, Dante Fowler, Donovan Ezeraku, Marshawn Nealon, Osa Digizua, Solomon Thomas, Jay Toya, Perrion Winfrey, Sam Williams, and James Houston. So that's the Cowboys. I feel like James Houston showed a lot during the preseason, but then he just showed up massively in that last game. Same for Perrion Winfrey. He showed up massively in that last game. If you notice, among the names you did not hear was Mozzie Smith. I think Mozzie Smith doesn't make the roster. Now, he does have a little bit of money tied into him because he's a first-round pick, so you would lose some cap space by cutting him. So if we're, all of the mind that the Cowboys are mostly concerned with the finances behind the 53-man roster, then you would take it and say, okay, I'll put Mozzie Smith on and I'll take who off? Maybe Perrion Winfrey at that point, goes to the wayside because I'm not taking James Houston off for Mozzie Smith. He definitely earned his spot. And a lot of these other guys have earned their spot. I'd argue Perrion Winfrey has earned his spot over Mozzie Smith, and that it might look bad for roster morale to have a person here who's clearly outplayed the person in front of them, but, they still get left off the roster because of financial terms. So I think the Cowboys have more than enough cap space this offseason to absorb something like Mozzie Smith because it's not a huge number. He was a late first-round pick. But they do lose a little bit of cap space by cutting Mozzie Smith. So just look out for the politics of the position there. But if we're just being pure, based on what we've seen, based on who earned what, Mozzie's off the roster. And then to round out, Trent Sieg, Brian Anger, and Brandon Aubrey, along with Perrion Winfrey and Sam Williams. So, you have your specialists on the roster. So the guys who were like on the borderline of not making the roster that made it for me were Perrion Winfrey, James Houston, Shamar James, Ryan Flournoy, and I think that's it. Those are and Phil Maffa. So those five slots to me are if the five most likely players that you would see not be on the roster and have someone else there. Whether it's Trayshawn Holden, whether it's Jalen Brooks, whether it is Mozzie Smith. So I had a handful, five guys who were the bottom five or the last five, I should say, because all those guys that I name, if they're on the roster, I feel like they could contribute. But those are my five guys that didn't initially make my absolutely these guys are here. It was like, oh, I'm up to 48 and I have five slots and I have one at each of these positions. Okay, let me go back and look. Oh, I feel good about Phil Maffa. Oh, I feel good, about Perion Winfrey. Oh, I feel, really good about James Houston and what he's done. Oh, I feel really good about Shamar James and what he's done. But if you have some other mechanisms where you're trying to get other guys on the roster, I could see some of those guys that were in my last five to be some of those guys that are kind of left off and have other people replacing them. But let me know what you guys think. What is your bottom five? Who would you replace with? Where do you think I'm wrong? Because you do this long enough or short enough, you're always going to be wrong about something. And I'm not here to tell you that I'm right 100% of the time at all. So I'd love to see you guys' thoughts. Give any comments below, as far as, hey, this is my guy and this is why. You know what I'm saying? Let's get into an argument. We got 10 days here before the game shows up. Let's argue a little bit. Let's fight for some of these guys on the roster. Let me know who you think should be there and where you think I was wrong or if you think I was completely wrong. And then let's come compare notes after Tuesday and see who's right and who's wrong. All right, I didn't mean to get all brolic with y'all, but thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hit me up on Twitter at JMillerIYL. You can also hit me up, knockersdownthebottom at outlook.com. Hit me up, knockersdownthebottom at gmail.com. Leave comments below. If there's questions or anything specific that you want to comment, just comment, man. It's an open book. We're here. Love you guys so much. Thank you guys for tuning in. Until next time, I'm your host, J Mill if you like. This has been Knockers on the Bottom. 53-man roster projection. I'm on it. I want to say I'm going to call my shot. I'm probably about like 98% accurate. But let's see what happens. But until next time, I'm your host, J Mill if you like. This has been Knockers on the Bottom. Peace.